Hello. I am actually recording this with sound and everything, so hopefully this will sound good. So it's Monday. I've got a day off work. I have 2 days off work actually. I'm not working tomorrow either. And I thought things have calmed down enough that I can do another video podcast episode. So this week, uh, so I guess I'll talk a little bit and about what has happened recently in the context of now, and and then I wanted to talk about hair. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But first off, yeah, the last week it was like there was a lot of intense energy, and it was so intense that I ended up getting sick. So then I got to have a few days off work to recover, and then I had a few days off that were already scheduled. So I had a little bit extra time, and my body really needed that. So I'm glad that I got it. And then we were right into full moon time. So I don't know how your full moons were, but for me, there was a lot of intense energy, but I felt like I was really flowing through it well. So it ended up being just a really interesting wild ride of experiences involving a Halloween queer boat party along the River Lee, and cycling there at night, which was gorgeous. Discovering new parks and green spaces that I just absolutely have fallen in love with. Lots of thrift shopping, and yeah, it's been a really beautiful time. Um, as we shift into the sort of fall and really get cozy and experiencing that sort of like thinning of the veil. I definitely had like some fun tarot card experiences with some friends recently, which was very nice. And yeah, it's been a time. Really interesting stuff is popping up and bubbling up. So we'll see. I think the next few months are going to be very interesting. But I mentioned I wanted to talk about hair. And this is a bit random, but hair is something that it's inescapably important to humans. And what I mean by that is that pretty much every identity that there is has some sort of hair association attached to it. You know, hair often communicates our identity and belonging to different groups. You know, hair has been associated with different subcultures, ethnicity groups, religious groups, identity, like sexual orientation, like certain like queerness or straightness has different like haircuts and vibes. And so all of this is interesting stuff. And historically, there's a lot of like folklore and beliefs about hair that relate to cutting or growing hair, treating hair with specific, substances like oils and scents and, herbal tinctures and things like that. Hair is really tied to our health, our physical health. So, if you're getting an abundance of nutrients, your hair is going to look different than if you are deficient in different nutrients. And in some sort of folkloric ideologies, I've read about ideas of, you know, if you're sick, to like do sort of like magical things like rituals to hair in order to relieve you of that sickness. So over like many years, hair has been something that I've thought about and kind of come across a lot of different ideas on. And for the last several years, well, really for like probably about a decade, I've wanted to have two goals with my personal hair experience. And one is to discover what my terminal hair length is. And a terminal hair length is the length of hair that your body will be able to grow. And that is different for everyone, and it's genetically determined, but there's a bit of a window of, um, I don't know, a tolerance window. I'm not sure what that, but it's variable within a certain window. based off of how you treat your hair. So you can improve your terminal hair length by, you know, doing things that reduce breakage and things like that. Um, And so, yes, I want to find out what my terminal hair length is, just as a personal inquiry to see like what is my body capable of? What genetics do have I been given, and how does that come about? And also, it's somewhat motivated by the desire to never have to have my hair cut. You know, like it's just like a bother that I don't want to have to do. Um, And so if your hair is just at a length, and if you find that length tolerable, then, you know, your hair won't go past that. It'll just continue growing and falling out periodically when it needs to and regenerating, and that's just the hair length you have. And I just like the idea of that. The other goal that I have for my hair is so a few years ago, I read that um, when colonizers came and started, you know, fighting natives in what we now call North America, um, there was this belief that they had like these supernatural powers and could sense things far before the colonizers could, and that's somewhat true for a number of reasons. One, not for supernatural reasons, but in just differences in approaches to, you know, the relationship to the land, relationship to the universe, and, you know, things like that. But one thing um, that apparently scientifically we've now discovered is that if you don't cut your hair for about 3 years, I mean, obviously there's probably a decent amount of variability there, but about 3 years after not cutting your hair, you develop nerve endings. And so the people who were of North American land, you know, of Turtle Island, those people didn't cut their hair and they had nerve endings in their hair. So when they were, you know, out and, you know, in outside in whatever it might turn into a combat zone or something, they had literally extra senses that that the colonizers who cut their hair didn't have. So I'm curious about allowing myself to grow nerve endings in my hair and seeing how does that feel? You know, like is that a different experience than not having nerve endings? You know, what does that feel like? So those are my goals. Those are my hair goals. And those are the reasons for them. And one thing that comes up a lot for me internally when, you know, having decided to do this, and you know, I've made a number of different attempts at reaching these goals, and kind of every now and again I'll get to like this length of hair and it'll be the awkward length and I just want to cut it and, you know, do something different, or I'll say, "Oh, well, maybe if I just dye it, I won't be bored." And then I end up having to cut my hair because it's so damaged. Um or because like it just looks really weird. Also, sorry, I was sick and I'm still kind of dealing with a little bit of congestion every now and again, so I might sound a bit weird. Um, yeah, so I've tried to do this a few times and ended up cutting my hair, and then, you know, that resets the clock. So um I think the last time I cut my hair was probably getting on to 2 years ago. I think I like, you know, wasn't treating myself as well as I had been. I had like, you know, really frayed ends, and I was just getting kind of sick of it and didn't want to deal with that anymore. So I cut off the ends, and then that resets the clock. So um so yeah, we'll say it's about 2 years that it's been since I last cut my hair. And So I've got at least another year before I could potentially be feeling that. Um, my hair is now down to like, let's see. I think the longest pieces when I pull them out because my hair is curly, um, so it's not it coils up, right? It's shorter than it actually is. So when I pull out my hair, not out, but like down, it just reaches the small of my back. The longest part of my hair reaches the small of my back. Which that's the longest I've ever grown my hair before. When I was a teenager, I had hair down that long, and I really loved having hair that long, and because of the shape of it, more of it was that long. Right now, I've I've got an undercut, right? So this is all very short, though I should freshen it up because it's getting a little bit long. Um, so I have like an undercut, which means the whole bottom bit of my hair is not growing long, so that there's not that much, or there's less hair that is super long than if all of my hair was growing long. And part of that is just nice to manage the volume, but but every now and again, I kind of wish that all of my hair was that long. But it's a bit of a trade-off. So I mentioned that hair can be an indicator of identity, and um, specifically for me, like, queerness is, really heavily tied to hair, and I I feel like I kinda online came out as non-binary, and, every now and again, I have to, like, remind people that that is a thing, and not that I have to, but, like, sometimes I feel compelled to, and, um, I'm feeling that less and less, not because it's less and less true, but just I feel more comfortable in myself, and I have less of a need to validate my reality in other people's eyes. Um, but anyways, so the whole being non-binary thing, um, I think that I mean, there's a large conversation to be had there. But in terms of hair, if you're assigned female at birth, people and you have long hair, people will kind of just assume that you're cis because long hair is associated with femininity, womanhood, like all of that. So having my hair get longer means that I am more often viewed as female than when I had shorter hair. And so, like, my queer identity is more visible when I have shorter hair. So I feel less visibly queer with as my hair gets longer. Um, sometimes, sometimes. And that can be a little upsetting because it's like, oh, no one can see who I am, but also on a certain level, like these sorts of decisions shouldn't be proof of my identity. Um, and it would be nice to have a world and a community where people don't assume one's identity based off of what you look like. But of course, that goes against our psychology, right? As humans, there's something called heuristics, which is mental shortcuts, which we all use in order to make sense of the world around us and to make it so that the world is less exhausting. So it's very important for us to rely on heuristics, these mental shortcuts, to reserve our brain power for things that we want to reserve it for. So I get that people take mental shortcuts. I get that people look at me and they're like, "Lady," I don't know. I'm not really sure what people assume when they look at me, and I think that that really depends on the person and what kind of experiences they've had in life. I find that people who are queer often kind of detect me as queer, which is nice. And yeah, I guess, this is largely what I wanted to say about hair, that it's this interesting, weird experience that kind of tells you so much and yet doesn't say anything about who someone is at the same time. And I also thought it would be nice to speak a little bit more about my personal journey with hair from like youth and going into right now, because when I was younger, when I was like a little kid, I had long hair and it really it really didn't fit with my lifestyle, we'll say. As a child, I was running through the woods and, getting tangled in twigs and getting branches and leaves and all sorts of, dirt and moss and everything in my hair because I would be like rolling around and in the ground. I would be hiking through the woods. I would go for swims and, having like nice hair was not a priority for me. Looking a certain way wasn't a priority for me. Experiencing life and adventure was a priority for me. And so pretty quickly, my parents realized that long hair was not practical for me. And largely, they discovered this because I would come home, in all sorts of states, and they would try to brush my hair, and like my hair was somewhat unbrushable. There were knots that were too big to really get through reasonably because I was a child with sensitive, nerves. Um, all I think all children have pretty sensitive nerves, but I also think that I might have been hypersensitive in a lot of ways. So, for me, for them to brush my hair, I was in tears. I would be just bawling my eyes out, crying out in pain because, like, ripping a brush through my hair was incredibly painful. And neither of my parents really had that, like, patience and tenderness and understanding of how to treat hair in order to deal with my hair. So it just wasn't a good situation. So they decided that I should have short hair. And I don't think I really cared. I was a kid. I didn't I didn't think about this. Hair was something that adults decided for me. And so we cut my hair and it was really short. It was like I think I had like a mushroom cut. Yeah, I had a mushroom cut for a while. Um when I was probably about 7. And when that happened, I remember walking around town with my mom and there being someone from the community came up to us and hadn't met me before but knew my mom and mentioned like, oh, I didn't know you had a son or something like that, and just assumed that I was a boy because I had short hair. And I was fine. Like I don't remember having like feeling any type of way about it myself, but I do remember my mom feeling really awkward about it and not knowing how to handle that. And I remember kind of like internalizing her discomfort and learning that it wasn't okay to be mistaken for a boy when you're actually a girl. And I also at that point in time believed that, you know, was declared a girl, therefore I was a girl, therefore, and that was unchangeable. That was something that I had to just accept that it couldn't be any other way. And so then I think that was sort of the first moment where I realized that, like sort of shame of gender and perception started creeping in. I learned that others could see me as a boy and that wasn't okay, even though it didn't feel wrong for me in that moment. But it did start me thinking about gender and getting curious about it because most of my friends were boys. I had some friends who were girls, but didn't really get along with them. We didn't really we weren't really interested in the same things a lot of the time. Like, it was an effort to be friends with girls. And whereas, like, with boys, it was effortless. Like, we wanted to do the same things. We wanted to, run around and, like, climb trees and make our clubhouses and build things with Lego. Um, yeah, like, I blended in with the boys and not really with the girls. But then I remember, kids at school starting to having sleepovers, and I thought that would be really fun, but I wasn't allowed to invite my friends for sleepovers because they were boys, and I felt like that was really unfair, and, it just kind of continued to progress, and, then I felt like I had to really try to be a girl and to fit in with girls because that was normal, and it was so painful for me, like, it there were some connections with girls that I got along with, but mostly it was the queer ones, like, or like the ones that were non-conforming. And um and and even at that, I feel like it might have been nicer if there was more integration with, the boys, or, boys, girls, right? Like, having more variety, gender variety in the friend group. And that kind of progressed in high school a bit. Um, but yeah, like, for a long time, I felt like I had a long big connection with my hair from the gender standpoint, but also I had big, frizzy, curly hair, and I felt really out of place. Like, I felt like my hair texture was not one that other people had, except for a couple, and they were often people who were ostracized, not necessarily because of their hair, but I made those associations. And yeah, I think I felt really uncomfortable when people touched my hair because the other girls had, like, these, silky straight hair, or, like, slight curls, but, like, it wasn't, like, frizzy, and, like, the texture that I had in my hair was not what other kids had. And so I had, like, a deep shame about my hair, and really felt, and to this day, I feel, really uncomfortable when people just wanna touch my hair. Like, that's that's a pretty intimate experience for me. So, um, there's that element as well. And then uh, when I was in my 20s and I cut my hair short again, it felt really liberating in a lot of ways, for many reasons, really. Like, there's this idea that when you're going through a big emotional change, that, you have a big haircut moment, and sometimes this is perceived as a breakdown, sometimes this is perceived as, a step towards your personal liberation. And I think about, like, when Britney Spears gave herself a buzz cut and everyone was like, she's losing it, versus, you know, when I can't think of a specific, like, popular person, but, like, some people will get haircuts after a breakup, and it's their sort of, like, step towards themselves and their own, like, personal recovery. And so for me, when I cut my hair short, it was a bit of that. Like, I was going through a divorce and trying to sort of reinvent myself and get back to who I am. And I ended up basically getting, like, a similar haircut to when I was a kid. And it was, I really wanted to have short hair again because I missed it. And I thought it would be kind of cool and trendy. And I didn't really think too deeply about it. I just wanted to have short hair again. And I mean, there was a lot of other things as well, like having longer hair, was me trying to, like, grasp at a fantasy of a life that I don't think I was ever going to live up to or enjoy. And so cutting my hair was a bit of that, but people immediately were like, "Oh, you're gay now." And I was like, "Only now." Like, um, you know, it it was interesting that people just assumed that, like, that was me coming out, and as much as I did try to blend in and sort of hide in, like, a straight world, I've always been bisexual or pansexual, and I've never really lied about that, like, there was never really a time that I was like, "Oh, no, I'm definitely straight," uh, and, like, would profess that, like, I maybe was quiet about it and didn't wanna be discovered, but I didn't o openly lie about it, uh, and not to say that that's better than if I did, um but I guess all the attention around me cutting my hair suddenly and, like, that being this big declaration of coming out, just felt weird and not necessarily wrong, but not necessarily right either. And I guess, yeah, growing my hair long, as much as it's like affirming in, who I am outside of socially prescribed identities, I'm kind of like a scientifically minded person. I'm and curious. I'm curious to know what my body can do. And so for me, it's very consistent with who I am to be growing out my hair, to find out my terminal length, to see if I can grow nerve endings on my hair. But it has these other connotations of like, erasing my queerness and being seen as like more female and more like normative. So yeah, I guess all of this all this to say, hair is complicated and it has a lot of associations with it. And this is a conversation that has come up a few times, so I thought I would just kind of record it, um, and release it out into the world, and maybe if I haven't had this conversation with you, maybe this could be, um, an invitation for you to share a little bit about what your hair has meant to you, what your journey with your hair has been like. How has it shaped you? Has have you thought about the things that I've talked about today? I don't know. I'm curious what other people think about their hair. Uh, and whether or not this was even interesting. And, like, even now, as I'm, like, thinking about this, there's, like, 5 other elements about hair that I could talk about in terms of, like, you know, maintenance, like, taking care of one's hair and the huge range of ways that people do that, rituals and products and, you know, that can tie into a lot of things. I'm thinking about, like, when I was in university and discovering the no poo, which is a terrible name. It's a terrible name for a movement, but the no poo movement, which means no shampoo, and this movement um is still kind of going strong as far as I'm aware. Like I've I continue to see videos online about this. Um, People realizing that, you know, yes, it's important to wash your hands, absolutely. Like cleanliness is important. Um, but in terms of using heavy detergents to wash your hair, it's not really necessary. If you are willing to put a little bit of effort into your like, self-care rituals and habits, you don't actually need to wash your hair with anything other than water. Um, Sometimes you might, depending on the kind of water you have, you might need to do some sort of cleansing with like, something acidic like vinegar. Um, but there's a lot of variables involved, and I could go for ages about talking about that subject. um, yeah, I remember, trying for years to do that, and because it's so outside of the norm, and when I was first discovering this movement, there really wasn't a whole lot of resources online. Now there's tons of resources online. You can really find a lot of information if you're looking for it. But um, yeah, at the time there wasn't really a whole lot, so I didn't know what I was doing. It took me a long time to like kind of figure out what works for me, and even then things didn't really work. But now I I have filtered water in the shower head, and so with filtered water, it's like softer water. So I'm just doing water only washes, and my hair is loving it. It's really like flourishing with this. So I haven't used shampoo on my hair in a long time. And um and some days I kind of regret that, but usually only because I am not putting enough effort into taking care of it and like, massaging the oils into the rest of my hair so that it's distributed and not just like staying there. Um yeah, so hair is interesting. uh yeah, and then I also thought about years ago I wrote this like children's book that never ended up becoming a thing because I don't know why. I guess I just didn't follow up with it. I don't know who to approach with publishing a children's book. Though I could think of a number of people who would make really great artists um for illustrations. But the story was about um a kid who has long hair, and then this like jealous crab cuts it, and there's some personal journey and lessons to be learned. But it's all about the magic of hair. And yeah, all my brain just went to, did you know that some people have made clothing out of hair? That's a thing as well. Um, a little bit. Yeah, so hair is interesting and weird. And it's also intimately tied to so many things. Um, and going back to that no shampoo movement, there's also like the tie-in um with sort of being environmentally aware and not putting more chemicals into our rivers and streams and bodies of water, um, more than we need to. So reducing the detergents that get created and released into the earth. Um, so it's quite a radical act as well to choose to allow your body to do what it naturally does and to support those natural processes in your habits. Anyways, this I've been rambling about hair for a long time. So I hope you liked my ramble about hair. Um Again, I feel like, if this was just about hair on the head, I could talk about body hair and for another half hour. But we'll save that for another time, I guess. Anyways, thanks for checking in, and I hope that your October and spooky time is going well. I hope you're lighting lots of candles and uh, having all the horror movie fun that you want, and getting spooky and eating pumpkins and other harvest related experiences. Howling at the moon, whatever. Uh, and I'll check in with you again, and let me know if you like my sort of random ramble about hair, and if that's a format of this podcast that you like, and maybe I'll just pick a thing each week and ramble about it because I've done a weird amount of research on a lot of things. Anyways, goodbye. I hope you're doing well, and check in with you later.